All right, so like I said last week, we're going to talk this week about the Transfiguration and why that's important and how that shows who Jesus is and that Jesus is indeed God Almighty. So this is from Mark chapter 9. We are still, now we've passed the halfway point in the book of Mark. Only 16 chapters, so we're just now past that halfway mark. But it says, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and brought them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his garments became radiant and exceedingly white, as no launderer or earth can whiten them. Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. For he did not know what to answer, for they became terrified. Then a cloud formed, overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud. This is my beloved Son, listen to him. All at once they looked around and saw no one with them anymore except Jesus alone. All right, so first thing it says is they went up on a high mountain. So tradition tells us that the high mountain is a mountain called Mount Tabor, or Tabor. So while it's not super high with regard to all mountains, it's only a couple hundred feet above sea level. However, if you go down to the base of the mountain, this is Mount Tabor, right? And here's where it sits in or around Israel. It is 1,476 feet above the Jezreel Valley. And so you've got this big valley, big mountain comes up off of it called Mount Tabor. And it, in the Old Testament, served as a border. It's the border between Zebulun, Issachar, and Naphtali. And so when we look in the Old Testament and we see it, it's mentioned in Joshua 19:22 as the border of those 3 tribes. Right, so one goes this way, one goes this way, and one goes this way. Right, so according to the book of Judges, Hazor was the seat of Jabin, the king of Canaan, whose commander Sisera led a Canaanite army against the Israelites. And in the Second Temple period, Mount Tabor was one of the mountain peaks on which it was the custom to light beacons in order to inform the northern village of Jewish holy days and of the beginning of new months. So basically, when the new moon would be there, it would light a light on Mount Tabor to let all of the tribes and all of the villages know that it was a holy day. When they would have like festival days, and they would light the lights on Mount Tabor. So this isn't like an insignificant place for this to happen. Yes, it's just north of where basically they do everything. Right, so Sea of Galilee is right here, so it's this side of Sea of Galilee, but everything else is down here. So Tabor, though, does play a significant role in Jewish history and what they're talking about and what they're doing. So now Peter, he always seems to be present, right? So it says he took Peter, James, and John up to this high place, this mountain. So Peter's always listed first among the 12 apostles in the gospel and in the book of Acts. Always. You see the apostles listed at the beginning of them. The first one is Peter. He was kind of seen as the de facto leader of the apostles. And along with James the elder and John, that would be the sons of thunder, he formed kind of a triumvirate within the 12, right? We're the top 3, we're the 3 leads, whatever you want to call that. They would be like the elders of the disciples. The rest of the 9 would be like deacons if we're looking at church structure. You would have Jesus as that high priest, then the next level, and then the rest of them. So Jesus allowed them to be the only apostles that were present at 3 particular occasions in his public ministry. So these 3 are the only ones. So Peter, James, and John. So we have the Transfiguration, that's one of the three. The raising of Jairus' daughter. So when Peter says, Talitha, right? Little girl, get up. They're there. So the guy who's writing this is his scribe, so it makes sense that, he would know a thing or two about this event. Then, so the rising of Jairus' daughter, that's in the Gospels, and then Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. You have Peter, James, and John. They go with him separate from the rest of them, and he goes off by himself to pray. And we're going to talk more about that a little later on. But he brings those three with him initially to kind of serve as that watch. And they obviously fumble that a little bit because they all fall asleep, because we're not supposed to fall asleep and on watch. That's a bad idea, right? For those who military, you know that rule. Falling asleep on watch is a no-no. Yeah. So, then we have James. According to the New Testament, he was the second of the apostles to die. And so in the book of Acts, it talks about Herod had killed James, put James to the sword, which means that, however they did it, but likely they chopped his head off. But he was the second apostle to die, right? Judas was being the first. He was the first to be martyred of the apostles, right? Like we talked about with John the Baptist. I think he's the first Christian martyr. However, when we start adding in James, now we're getting into the martyrdom and the martyr narratives, which I think the martyrdom of James proves to us that Peter and Paul are still alive at the end of the book of Acts, right? Because you would think that if you were going to talk about the martyrdom of this guy, much lesser known at this point than Peter and Paul, then why would you leave the book still open with them alive if they were in fact dead? Doesn't make sense, which dates the book of Acts to 66, Acts being the second book in the series, and Luke being the first means Luke was written pre-66. It actually is before Paul is released the first time, which is 62. So Luke is written somewhere in 62, 61, or 60, most likely. So that's a whole nother, this is why we can't date these things super late, because they say the Mark is the first written, and we know that because it's got the lowest Christology, and we're proving that's not true. We know that because, it's the shortest, okay? Then why date Mark to the 70s? Because we already know that Luke's in the 60s. So if you want to claim that Mark is first, you're going to have to bump those numbers down a little bit. And you've got some rookie numbers being in the 60s. So a guy named Henry Alford, he suggests that he was probably beheaded. And there are people who talk about, they were called the Sons of Thunder, right? James and John were. I could see him throwing a little big boy hissy fit over something, getting angry at somebody, yelling at somebody, get off my lawn kind of thing going on, right? And that leads to a little tit for tat. And so he kind of has we can see by description, he's probably got a bit of a temper, flies off the handle a little bit. We see a little bit of that with John, even though he's the youngest. But that would be where some might believe and some might say that their nickname Sons of Thunder comes from, and possibly is a reason that he was put to death. Fly off the handle with the wrong person and things don't go well. And then John, yeah.
Was James and John related to Peter at all?
No. Okay. Well, not that the Bible tells us, right? Maybe, but we don't know. There's nothing to say they were. They definitely weren't brothers. right? Because we had the two sons of Zebedee, and then Peter and Andrew are brothers. So it does tell us they are. But James and John are brothers. Right? This is the other son of thunder that's in that inner sanctum group. We have John. He's generally listed as the youngest apostle, the son of Zebedee and Salome. And so we know his parents, we know his brother, James the elder, the first to be put to death as a Christian martyr. Now the church fathers, depending on which one you're reading, they give him different little surnames. He's John the Evangelist, right? Saint John the Evangelist. Some people, like some stained glass, will have that in it. And then you'll find another stained glass that'll have like the Revelation in it, and it'll be John of Patmos, because he was sent to Patmos as a kind of prison camp thing they had going on there. The tale tells that the Romans tried to put him to death. And when they failed to put him to death by boiling him in oil, they cast him to Patmos. Now, how true this is, I don't know, but they sent him to Patmos, and it was at Patmos, which we know Patmos was a work camp. We know that John was at Patmos, so we know that he indeed was a prisoner at a work camp. So that's why he's known as John of Patmos. John the Elder, to differentiate him from Johns that would come later. And then the beloved disciple, because that's what John refers to himself as in the book of John. So most believe that he outlived the remaining apostles and was the only one to die of natural causes. Everybody else
lost their head.
Didn't. So now, if you really read the history of it all, you have to go, okay, I can trust this, I can't trust that, right? The death of Peter, everybody, believes upside down, right? That comes from 500 years afterwards. I wouldn't say that that's a good representation of history, because if it was, then I could just believe the Quran and what it teaches about Jesus. It's about the same time frame. So we don't do history like that anywhere else. I don't know why we'd start with Peter. So Matthew, we don't have any indication that he was martyred before about the 700s. Mark, we don't have any indication until about the 300s or 400s, right? So some of these, we have more fidelity, like Peter, we know he died, right? Paul, we know he died. We know how they died, and we know about when they died. We know why they died, right? Those are important. But we do know that John, nobody claims that John was martyred, is basically what we know. Now, there are some people who believe that Jesus is still alive, or John is still alive, like in the flesh. That is a belief held by the Latter-day Saints. They clarify that John did not die, but was allowed to remain on the earth as a ministering servant until the time of the Lord's second coming. So not only was he still alive when they wrote Doctrines and Covenants, but he's still alive today, according to them. However, I want it to be noted, he is not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So if he's still alive and he says, nope, that's not the church to go to, then I agree with him. So, I kid. Well, not about the fact that they do believe that he's still alive. That is 100% true. No, there's about a million other reasons not to go there. All right, so it says that Jesus was transfigured in front of them. That's kind of a big fancy word. The Greek word is metamorpho, right? Metamorpho. So, what does that sound like? Metamorphosis. It just means to change. That's all the word means.
Exactly.
We gave it some fancy, highfalutin theological word. It just needs to change. He was changed in front of them, and he was given a shining appearance. So the word literally just means to change into another form, to transform, to transfigure. It was transformed in front of them. And we're not talking Optimus Prime here. We're talking,
Transform.
his face becomes white, his clothes become glowing. I mean, we get this same picture of Moses coming down off the mountain, right? That his face has become bright white, and like they couldn't look at him because he was so bright. Right? I could see where Peter's confusion kind of hops in here. You read the confusion of the Jews as Moses is coming down. Right? They're like, I don't know what to make of this. Do we bow down and worship you now? Right? So I get it. I can see where his mistake comes from, but it had to be Peter who stuck his foot in his mouth, because that's what Peter is wont to do. So Christ's appearance was changed and was resplendent with divine brightness on the Mount of Transfiguration, right? So just that holy light around him. You see it in Catholic stained works or Catholic iconography a lot with anybody that's a saint.
They like put that halo around them.
It's not a halo. See, some people believe that's a halo. It is a divine brightness around them, is what that's to signify, saying that they are, in the presence of God right then. Right? So that's what that's to signify. And a lot of people, even if you were to go over and talk to a Catholic right now and you were to say, hey, what's this bright thing around them? They're going to tell you it's a halo. But that stems from this divine brightness, and that's what it's meant to signify. So, no, I thought I went 2 slides and I didn't. All right, so Elijah appeared. Elijah is that symbol of the prophets. He's kind of the big dog prophet, if you really think about it. You get Elijah and then his disciple Elisha. They kind of do that heavy lifting in a really tumultuous period. Through several kings and kingdoms, and even a nasty queen or two. So think of 1 Kings 18. You've got Elijah. He defended the worship of the Hebrew deity Yahweh over that of the Canaanite deity Baal. Right? So he's out there, and I like it because it shows defense of the faith, but it also shows offense, right? We always think as Christians we're supposed to be these nice and polite people, and okay, so when we talk about what does Jesus say that we will prevail over? What will not stand?
Gates of hell.
The gates of hell. Is a gate an offensive thing or a defensive thing?
It's a defense.
Defensive. Yeah. So we are supposed to go against the defensive thing of Satan. Can you do that with a shield? No. That takes a battering ram and a sword. So you're going in, and it is a fight. We are told to go and fight. Like offensive fight. So he's defending God. He's like, okay guys, I'm going to show you that God, he lets God do the talking on that part. But man, while they're going and they're worshiping Baal, he is talking so much smack.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, maybe try be a little louder. I think, maybe he's indisposed. Maybe he's on the John. Right? So there's also a lot of miracles that were done through Elijah. So we have the resurrection. He resurrects the widow's son. Calls for and gets the bringing down of fire from the sky when God is going and beating the crap out of Baal. He ascended to heaven alive on that fiery chariot. That's kind of a big deal. But he's also portrayed as leading a school of prophets known as sons of the prophets. So he's the prophet of prophets. He's kind of that guy. So Elijah. So Jesus. Now we've got Elijah. And then we got, oh, I love this. This is my favorite meme in the face of the planet. They're saying, Baal, help us. And the cat says, I'm pooping. Baal, and then he says, I'm pooping. Right? So I find that to be hysterical because I'm a 12-year-old. Then it says that Moses was alongside him. And now Rosalind's blushing. Awesome. If I can embarrass you, I will. Just remember that at all times.
No, I'm a 12-year-old too.
So, in Abrahamic religions, Moses was the Hebrew prophet who led Israelites out of slavery in the Exodus from Egypt. So they believed that Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. I don't know how they get away with this, but Muslims believe that Moses was that prophet as well. But they don't believe that he was of that lineage of Isaac. They think that he's of the lineage of Ishmael, which is weird. But anyways, I digress. So in Abrahamic religions, Moses was the Hebrew prophet who led the Israelites out of slavery in the Exodus from Egypt. He's that guy. He's also depicted as the ultimate bearer and enactor of God's law. Anytime you see iconography of Moses, what's he got in his hands? 2 stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. Right? Always. Even when you look at state and federal buildings in America, you got that dude with 2 stone tablets. You know who he is. They like to call him the lawgiver. That's what he's labeled as. If you go and look at like brochures of the outlay or layout of the Supreme Court, the guy holding 2 tablets, and they're like, the lawgiver, and I'm like, liar, that's Moses. So he represents this Old Testament law that was given at Mount Sinai. Right? So we've got the prophets, now we've got the law. Now, Paul characterized the law as goodness as that which exposed his sin, right? That which shows us where our sin is. And that's why the law is awesome. Right? It's quite easy for us to imagine Paul here speaking of Moses. Right? Moses is showing the people, hey, here's where you're messing up. Right? And because you can't hold these 10, let's write, 613 more. Because that's easier.
Of course.
Anybody wearing denim? Yeah. Mixed fabric, sinner. Right? Everybody got elastic in their cotton sweats? Sinner. Mixed fabric. How about shrimp? Anybody like shrimp? Sinner. Right? 613 laws, that's a whole lot. All right, that's all I'm saying. So, but Jesus is that fulfillment of the law and the prophets. So that means he's greater than the law and the prophets. Well, Hebrews tells us that he's greater than the law, the prophets, and the angels, and every created thing. Well, that means he's uncreated. The only thing uncreated is, God. So, but in Matthew 5, verses 17 and 19, Jesus says, do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. No, he bunches them together. Old Testament still stands. Andy Stanley says, unhitch yourself from the Old Testament. Old Testament stands. The law and the prophets. That's what you got in the Old Testament. That's it. You got the books of the law. You got the prophets. You do away with the histories, you lose Elijah. You lose Elisha. You lose all of that. Well, you don't want to do that either. So I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. means he's above them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or the stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Till all is accomplished. Okay? So, it's accomplished. What's that mean? We'll get there. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Keep the commands, right? And he goes through and shows us what those commands are, right? The 2 commandments. Love Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Whoever keeps these commandments and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. That's what I want to hear. I'd really like to just make it, well done, my good and faithful servant. I'm satisfied if I get that far. Okay, so rabbi. If you say the word rabbi, that is Greek. In Hebrew, it's more like rabboni, but it literally just means teacher. My teacher or my master. So in first century Jewish context, it was used for individuals recognized as authoritative teachers of the law. Note, when they come up to Jesus and they're like, and this is a scribe, and he says, Rabbi. This is a scribe, not a Christian, says Rabbi. He is recognizing him as an authoritative teacher of the law. This is an official position. Right? You had rabbis. They could teach the law. So if a scribe who has authority over the law comes to a rabbi and says, okay, how do you interpret this? As though they're going to correct him on it, and he teaches it perfectly, and they said, you've spoken rightly. Right? Of course he did. He's Jesus. I mean, come on. Right? But they are referring to him as an authoritative teacher and interpreter of the law, which is kind of cool to think about. So even the scribes and the Pharisees understood that he knew what he was talking about because they referred to him as rabbi. Jesus was frequently addressed as rabbi or teacher by his disciples and others, indicating that he was regarded as a respected figure in Jewish society. And they're not just looking at him and going, this guy... The reason that they get away with him is they're like, this guy's really a rabble-rouser. Right? They were looking for a thing to do, and they were like, he's a blasphemer. He's equated himself with God. Let's get him. So, it was not his teachings, except for the ones about him being God, that got him done away with. And that's, if you note at the end, they're at his trial, like, hey, what do you make of these claims? And he's like, of course I'm the Son of Man. And he rips his garments and he's like, you've blasphemed. Everybody here, we've heard him blaspheme. What more do we need of witnesses? All that good stuff. It was an ugly scene. Not a good day. So how about a tabernacle? Peter's like, ooh, Jesus, we see you all transfigured and stuff. We need to build a tabernacle for each of you. One for Moses and one for... Who's the tabernacle for? It's for God alone. Right? In the Jewish context, it's for God alone. It's to be the holy place where the Jewish people could come to meet God. Right? So Peter recognizes something different about Jesus because of this. So he's like, let's build a tabernacle. This is the word is mishkan, which just means a dwelling place. It means a portable dwelling place. It's a portable sanctuary or sacred tent constructed by the Israelites in the wilderness under Moses' direction to house the presence of God. As mobile temple, served as center of worship and sacrifice for 40 years, featuring a courtyard, a holy place, a holy of holies, which housed the Ark of the Covenant. And, this was the dwelling place of God. And Peter's like, hey, let's make 3 of them. Yeah, Moses and Elijah are not God, man. All right? They're not gods. But you're getting there, Peter. You're kind of starting to understand things. Long way from the get thee behind me, Satan, we read about last week. But not far enough behind because he's still putting his foot in his mouth. Right? I think God speaks, and God says, this is my beloved son. Listen to him. Right? God speaks in a lot of places in the Bible. I just wanted to pull some big ones out. Mostly because when we see God speaking, really kind of different circumstances in each. So, in the beginning was the Word. The Word, or the speech. And the Word was with God. The Word was God. The Logos. The Word. That would be the speech of God. How do we know that that's the speech of God? Because in Genesis 1:3 it says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. This is the person who is the voice of God. That would be Jesus. When God speaks, it's the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Hey, look at that. We've got two verses of the Trinity right there. If you go one verse earlier, right? The Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the waters of the deep. That's verse 2. And verse 1 is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So, we see Jesus. So, we've got Jesus, we've got Jesus. Now, Matthew 3:16 and 17. This is another one of those cool 3:16 moments. You get a lot of those in the Bible. I mean, there's a lot of them, especially you go through the New Testament. Look up a chapter 3, verse 16 or something. You're like, that's really cool. That one's really cool. Everybody sticks with John 3:16 because it's that one that it really made its way around with the Jesus Revolution in the 70s, right? It was on signs at football games and stuff, and I was like, when I was a kid, I was like, what's that thing?
The multicolored hair guy.
That's right.
So it says, after being baptized, Jesus came up immediately from water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove and lighting on him. That's verse 16. And behold, a voice out of the heaven said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. So we have that beloved Son. Again, first time he says, with whom I am well pleased. This time he says, listen to him. He's putting down some spiritual truth. You need to be listening to it. That's what he's saying there. So we hear the beloved Son again, Matthew 26. But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. So who did they expect the Messiah to be? The Son of the Most High God. So if you came and said you were the Messiah, you were saying that you are the Son of the Most High God. And when they said the Son of the Most High God, they were like, hey, that means you're God. So, if you said yes to that, you would be a blasphemer. Unless it's true, at which point, you're not. Jesus said to him, you have said it yourself. You said what I am. You know who I am. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. This is one that people often miss. This is a claim to being God. That itself, right there, coming on the clouds of heaven, is a claim to divinity. Period. Because if you pay attention to the Old Testament, the only one who is called a cloud rider, that's the
Riding on the cloud.
Yeah, the one who rides on the clouds, the only one that is ever attributed to is Yahweh. So when Jesus says, you're going to see me riding on the clouds, yeah, that's blasphemy unless it's true.
Also in Isaiah, they talk about the right hand of power.
Yeah, the right hand of power. So that's just the one who is in the presence of God, right? That would be what they're assuming there. But this is the one that... So this one is Daniel, right? This is from Daniel. What is that? 7:14, right? Daniel 7:14. The Son of Man. I saw one as the Son of Man, right? It's also in Daniel 3 with the 3 boys in the furnace, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So I saw one as the Son of Man, right? How many did we put in there? 3. There are 4 in there, and one of them has appearance of the Son of a God. Right. Okay. But yeah, Son of Man, that is a clear, this is God. So when Jesus says that you're going to see the Son of Man, he's saying you're going to see God. Then when he says that he's coming on the clouds of heaven, that is also, I'm God. So basically he says, you've said it. You've said that I'm the Son of God, right? Claim to deity. Nevertheless, I tell you, you'll see the Son of Man claim to deity. At the right hand of power, claim deity. Coming on the clouds of heaven, claim deity. 1 sentence, 4 claims. All to him being God. So if they want to call this a faithful statement, which you would be very hard-pressed to find somebody who would say this is not a faithful statement. And even Bart Ehrman would concede that this was in the original writing of Matthew. Then Jesus certainly makes 4 claims to being God in 1 sentence there. But that's not in Mark, that's in Matthew. We'll get there. And then he says, listen to him. Listen to him. So, this is from the Great Commission, Matthew 28. He says, all authority is being given to me in heaven and on earth. I have all authority. Where? Heaven and earth. Both. So when people are like, well, Satan's in charge on earth. No, he's not. Jesus is. He has the authority. Where? Heaven and earth. Both. Go therefore, right? Send you out. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to, there's that word I love so much, observe. It means to obey. Teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. There will never be a time that Jesus is not with us. He is with us always, even to the end of the age. Right? So, but he says that he has the authority. So God also says he has the authority. Listen to him. This is my son, my beloved son. Listen to him. The Son of God. And then, Jesus was alone. Still shining brightly. Right? I always think REM, shining happy people. He's shining brightly. So immediately, so he was alone. Meaning Elijah and Moses had left. The other 3 are still there. They're watching and they're like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Right? So Jesus liked being alone sometimes. Because he was human. Sometimes that's what humans want. Be alone. No. Because he wanted to be with the Father. Present with the Father. So we see Jesus being alone in multiple places in the Bible, right? We talked about Mark 6, 45 and 46. Told his disciples, get in the boat so I can go up on the mountain to pray. I'm going to do that by my lonesome. And then he walks past them in the dark, and they cry, and he rescues them. And then in Mark 14, right, they came to a place named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here until I have prayed. And he took with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be very distressed and troubled. Right? So he leaves the disciples in one spot, goes a little deeper. He's like, you 3 stand watch. He goes on his own and he prays. You know, and if you think that Jesus never had any anxiety over anything, dude sweat blood. That is a super intense anxiety causes that. Like the worst kind of anxiety. There have been cases reported of people actually sweating blood in beyond all measure anxiety situations. So
It's usually through the eyes. That's it.
through the eyes, through pores on the side of the face generally. But yeah, it's not a, I'm sure it's not a pretty sight, right? So we see Jesus referred to as God in multiple ways in this passage, right? Not just one or two, but in a lot of different ways. So we see, him having that divine glow to him, right? And then bringing back two people who aren't on heaven or aren't on earth to be with him. Right? Then God saying, "This is my beloved son." It's a divine thing, right? Listen to him. He has that authority. He's got the authority of God. That's a divine thing, right? And then, Peter acknowledges, hey, something's going on here that I can't explain. It's a little divine-ish thing going on. Right? Let's build some tabernacles. That's places where you go to worship God. Right? So, and then, Jesus being alone, that's, kind of a man thing, right? The humanity side of him, because he is fully God, but fully man. Right? So, homoousios. So, that's kind of what I got. So, yeah, I'll give what you got.
How many years before he was sweating blood was he with Satan?
We don't
how many
know.
years before that?
We don't know.
Okay.
So, it was could have been 3, it could have been 10, it could have been, nobody knows for sure. Right? There's a lot of different ways that people want to calculate how long Jesus' ministry was, and they do it by the number of festivals that are mentioned, but that's to argue from silence, right? Oh, they didn't mention this one, so he didn't go to it, so, observant Jew would have gone to all of them. So we'd have, 10. That doesn't make sense, right? It's like saying I didn't go to work today because I didn't talk about it. Same story. So, any other questions, comments, concerns? Where did you go left at that one? No, nothing. All right.